how did you actually design your instrument, your rubrics, and also your assessment? So, going back to the same assignment that I gave to my students, if I decide that I am going to use a holistic rubric instead, I decided that no, I'm not going to use an analytic rubric. This is just for example of how it would look like now when I transform my analytic rubric into a holistic rubric. This is how it looks like. Adequate, developing, competent, excellent. And I only have this column here, which is a combination of what I have actually written in the criteria for low. Learner is merely reporting and summarizing the events of learning activities. Learners show limited ability to connect the theories. Portfolio has less than 14 updates. I have taken all the criteria from an analytic rubric, the low competency or the low rating, yeah, I have put it together, lumped it together, and made it into a holistic rubric. The same thing as well, if the student is actually at the excellent level, more than 85%, whatever that I have written in the descriptors for the higher score, I have lumped it together here. Then it becomes a holistic rubric, meaning you can transform your analytic rubric into a holistic rubric and from a holistic rubric into an analytic rubric. No problem. And I think no one is going to question you, yeah? Why are you using an analytic rubric instead of a holistic rubric for your assignment? Because we are the one who is the expert in this area. And you are the one who designed this assessment. So you are going to have the final say for your assessment. So just to recap, just now, this is the analytic rubric. So what I did actually from the analytic rubric, I have taken all these descriptors, I put it together, and it became a holistic rubric at the lowest level. Now, going back to what I mentioned about a generic rubric, yeah, this is an example of my assessment, my assignment that I designed for my students. This is for master students. Yeah, I'm teaching instructional design for.
Prof, sorry, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Does that mean for the analytic rubrics and the holistic rubrics, the criteria, they are exactly the same? It's just a matter of difference in presenting them.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You can actually make it exactly the same, taking the same words, or you can rephrase it, meaning that there's no extra work when you already have an analytic rubric and decided, okay, I'm going to change this into a holistic rubric. No extra work is actually going to take place on your part, because you can actually use what's already in the analytic rubric, but it doesn't mean that it's compulsory to be exactly the same. Did I answer your question?
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Well, question.
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, if let's say the holistic rubric is some sort like a summary to analytic rubrics, or maybe if we look closer, those in the holistic rubric, it doesn't really reflect the details in the analytic rubrics. Would that be a problem?
No, it wouldn't be a problem also. It depends, you know, actually, if you start with a holistic rubric actually is quite brief, quite general. When you transform that into an analytic rubric, I believe that you probably need to expand the descriptors. But if you start your rubrics, the first time you develop your rubric and you decide that I'm going to do an analytic rubric, it's all very clear already, very detailed already. Then you just transform it into a holistic rubric. But I believe many of us actually use an analytic rubric for our assessment. And there will be time when you decide that maybe this type of assessment for this particular week 1 to 5, you want to use a holistic, then you can transform. Yeah. But I don't think it is it is a problem actually.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
No. Yes. I'm working in a group, and like for instance, you in one of your rubric you mentioned the student demonstrate a remarkable ability, and now that remarkable ability, it seems to be too general. How do you define remarkable? You create a very specific, so-called specific rubrics. Do we need another rubrics to explain this that particular rubrics like remarkable ability? It's very subjective when I work in a group. Perhaps if I'm an individual lecturer, I design my rubric, I know what it means and I can explain to my student. But you're working in a group, different lecturers, different capability, different worldview, different ideas. How do we settle this issue of precision? Actually, yeah.
All right. How do you settle this issue of decision? It would be reflected in your description. Actually, the performance description of your rubric is already there. When you say that this student is remarkable, right? Then I would recommend that remarkable becomes one of the rating skills. And under remarkable, then you would then define what you mean by remarkable. What are the things that you want the students to be able to achieve or to showcase to you when they are at this stage? And for them to be categorized as remarkable, then you can give your ratings, maybe 8 to 15 marks. And this student is so good, it's 15 marks for this particular student. And going back to your question, yeah, how do you actually define the precision? All of you really have to sit together and look at the rating scales, yeah, and then come up with your performance descriptors. What do you need, which means that you have to come up with a general consensus here. What do you actually agree upon when you say that this student is remarkable? You don't need a separate rubrics or separate section to explain the rubrics. The rubrics stand on its own. It goes back to what you have in your performance descriptors. So the clearer and the more detailed your performance descriptors, the better for your team members, so that everybody has this standard understanding. They all have this same understanding of what do you mean by students who are really competent, for example.
Hello, Prof. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Prof, do you need to map each criteria of the rubrics to the respective LO of the module?
Well, I wouldn't say that exactly everything, but you have to decide the number of your criteria. Yeah, is this going to reflect your objective? It has to tie up with your objective. So I believe like you have 3 objectives. Maybe objective 1 refers to your first component, which is the cognitive. Then you have your psychomotor. It has to tie back. Meaning, what you design for your assessment and how you are going to assess that assignment would measure that particular LO. So going back to the constructive alignment, definitely.
So I take it as a yes, Prof?
It's
but not
actually
everything.
Yes, yeah, actually it's a yes.
But not all the components, right?
Not all the components, because sometimes you have your final exam. Your final exam is going to measure certain components of your LOs, right? So some that is not measured by your rubric would be measured by your final exam. I mean, in UPM, we still have final exam. I'm not sure about your university.
Okay, thank you, Prof.
All right.
Hi, Prof.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, my name is Irna. I would like to ask about the rubric.
Yes.
I'm not sure what type of rubric that I'm using, but I think it's more to specific rubric. And what I found out is when I do the specific rubric, for example, if the mark is 10, the student got near to 10. I'm not sure is it good or not, because for example, what I did is for practical report, what they have to put in the written report. For the discussion part, I put 20 marks, and then I put what they have to put in the discussion. For example, explanation of this one, description of this one. So by doing that, the student got high mark. Is it like a leaking the point?
No, I don't think so. What you actually do is correct, and you are rewarding the students for something that they can achieve. So don't worry about them having scored very high. Yeah? So I have questions from previous participants from other universities. They are worried that when they use the rubric, because it's very objective. And when the students actually show that they have this ability, what they have in the assessment or the assignment produced allows them or allows the instructor to give them more marks. The graph is skewed, meaning that more students are scoring A. Well, actually, that's a good thing. That is a good thing. When you use rubrics, you are measuring the actual performance of the students. I wouldn't worry about that.
Okay, nothing wrong with like a point by point what they have to put, but didn't give the answer.
Yeah, I wouldn't
Okay.
worry about that.
Okay, thank you, Prof.
Okay. All right, so going back to the generic rubrics, yes, this is the option that I gave to my students, 3 assignments, answer 2. And this is how a generic rubric look like. It is still an analytic rubric here, but you would see that it's quite general. Even if they answer assignment 1 and 3, or assignment 2 and 3, they will still be assessed by the same rubric. 3 components here: understanding, in-text citation, evidence of learning. 35% goes to understanding here. 10% goes to in-text citations. This is an example of a generic rubric. More rubric examples. This is a very detailed, comprehensive rubric. So this one was developed by the Ministry of Higher Education. You would see that they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 scales. And this is the attribute. This is actually the criteria. And within that criteria, they have sub-criteria. This is even more specific. I'm not going to go into detail, but this is to give you an idea, yeah, how comprehensive your rubric can really look like, depending on your preference. Yeah. And some examples of the assessment that can be used for this rubric. So you see, it measures the students at very weak to very good. Very good, able to deliver ideas with great clarity. Students who are very weak, not able to deliver ideas clearly and require major improvements. This is measuring the students' verbal communication, which is CS lah, the LO. Yeah? Which means that, going back to the same question earlier that you asked, whether it has to tie back with your LO, yes, it has to. So many more examples. I'm not going to go through with you since you have my slides already. Yeah. This is for teamwork. This is for values and attitudes. Yeah. And this is for lifelong learning. Gives you an idea of how you are going to write your performance descriptors. So going back to the question of how do you actually define precision? Yeah. To decide on the precise definition, it has to be spelled out in your performance descriptors, especially if you're teaching in a group, more than one person. Everybody has to have the same understanding, because we don't want one lecturer to be giving very good when the other lecturer says, this is only good. It has to be standardized for your rubrics. So this is another example. So you see, this is for entrepreneurial skills. So you can go through later after we finish the session, yeah? Many more examples. So it's almost 10 o'clock. So we'll take a 5-minute break and we'll come back to do the second part of the session. But in between, I will be here. If you have any more questions you want to ask me, I can give you, or I can clarify whatever doubts that you have.
Thank you, Prof. Wong. All right, let's have a 5 minutes break. We'll resume at 10 a.m. inshallah.
Prof, hi, Prof.
Hi.
This is Hadi, one of the lecturers of IIM. I just want to ask regarding to the rubric. My experience before the rubric is that whenever I give the basic rubric based on the LO, based on the course online, they will keep on asking question for a subset of each of the rubric. And finally, I have no way to answer. Not to say I cannot answer. I mean, it really takes a long time to a certain level, to a certain group of students.
You mean the students are asking you for a subset of the rubrics?
Subsets and subsets. And what do you mean by summary? And then they ask me, what summary do you think? I mean, summary is, it's generic to understand what is summary, but yet they ask so many questions, how should you work in the rubric? So I showed them the rubric. And finally, class again, what do you mean by this? Finally, to a level that one class is just to mention about, for instance, just talking about summary, it takes about 40 minutes to talk about summary. and it's not we disagree with asking question, then it's time when we're telling too details about rubric.
Okay, I think you have to control the questions that they ask. Well, maybe one example you could actually do is you can show them an example of a good assessment or assignment that was given or was done by the previous students. They will give them an idea of why or how to do it. When you talk about summary, if they're so blur about summary, you can use previous students' assignment and show it to them. I do sometimes actually show them poor assignment and good assignment. But of course, that is something that very subjective, because sometimes when we show it to them, they have this idea of trying to copy that.
Agree, Prof.
Yeah.
That's my next statement, Prof.
So
Because
I
when
try
this
not
is,
to. I try not to. But I think probably you will have to, expect them to go and find out what do you mean by summary. Well, I believe that you have given some explanation to them and they keep asking you. I think we have to draw a line to that.
So, Prof, should we share the best sample to class or not?
no,
I wouldn't recommend that. I wouldn't recommend that.
they always want that type of sample, Prof. This is based on experience all the time. We don't say
Yeah,
that's wrong.
basically spoon feeding. Yes.
Yeah.
Spoon feeding. Yeah, that's the one. Second is that when they ask the question, finally they ask a question is, sir, is this what you want?
Yes.
It's what I want. It's not about what I want. It's about, this is education. And you have to follow that. No, it's that what you want, sir. This question comes from first year until even to a PhD level.
Okay. So I do have the same problem, but what I notice now with the ChatGPT, which has come into existence, they have been referring to a lot to ChatGPT. And what I actually, last semester, I didn't allow them to use ChatGPT, but then I realized that it's not something that I can control. For this semester, I allowed them to use ChatGPT, but to my surprise, the students, so I had a session with them towards the end of the semester, before they submit the assignment. I have this 1 or 2 hours period with them to discuss about what they have done for the assignment, and they wanted to ask whether this is okay or this is how they improve it and all that. So I do have this session with my students, and I was surprised when they actually tell me that, I actually found ChatGPT's answer not so accurate. I didn't think that the ChatGPT gave me a very good answer, which means that these students are actually, what they're doing is they are making decisions here. They are able to comprehend the answers. This is not really accurate. So it makes them actually, more critical thinkers in that sense that what ChatGPT is giving them is not something that they should just cut and paste. So I was really happy with that direction and how things have unfolded for this semester. So I think for next semester also, I will still continue to allow them to use ChatGPT, but in a sense that it is meant for them to clear their doubts, but not to cut and paste their assignments.
Prof, I need.
Thanks, Prof.
Okay. Prof, I want to ask you about the rubric thing. Okay, I understand that for my subject, I'm teaching law. So most of the subject is actually a drafting assessment. So it's a drafting assignment. So when it comes to drafting a course paper for courts or for any documents like letters, so there's no actually like right and wrong. It's just that how they apply it. But I did give them the format, how it is expected. For example, letters, how to draft letters, what is the heading must have. So I not give word by word the details of the rubric, like, okay, for introduction, you have 1 point. I did not give that. So what amount to a good, I did not allocated that. But I did mention in my rubric that allocated marks for this particular document is how much.
Okay.
Is it enough or it has to be details? Like, how is it good? Why is it 0.5? What is it 1, for example?
How is there a rating scale for your rubric actually?
Rating, actually I just allocated marks.
So I think that's okay, because you have actually described what they're expected to do, and if you do this, you will get 1 mark. If you do that, you get 2 marks. That's clear enough. That is some kind of rubrics to me. Yes.
All right. Thank you, Prof.
Welcome.
Prof, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yes. Every semester I have this problem of students coming from different cultural backgrounds, different capability, and their SPM results do not really represent their quality. particularly in terms of languages. Sometimes I feel very bad because students coming from like languages very poor. And I don't know, because the rubrics you try to assess them based on the rubrics, but the problem is that those who are good at language like English or Arabic, of course, they have a head start. So how do I deal with this problem? I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, I agree with you. Those
Yeah.
who are able to do well, they tend to do well. But what I do is I do have criteria which is for the English. Or sometimes I don't even assess their English, but I have more component on content, the content part. So even if sometimes if you are able, your English is very good, very proficient in English, but you don't have the content. Of course, then the criteria in my rubrics is going to assess how much this student is going to get. The ability to understand, for example, their ability to comprehend that concept. And also, what I did for this semester, now we don't have that many diverse international students, but we do have international students. The previous semester, so I was teaching this group of students for 2 semesters. The same students, 8 students for masters, they enrolled in my class last semester and they enrolled in my class this semester. What I decided that last semester, I had 5 assignments for them. And like you say, those who were very good in their language would score better. This semester, I decided I'm not going to have 5 written assessment. I translate that into a final exam which is a multiple choice question. 30%, meaning that I'm trying to help my students who are not so proficient in the language. Yeah, of course they're handicapped in that sense. But multiple choice question doesn't actually take into account the ability to write well. So which means that you're designing the types of assessment that you are giving to the students. I do agree with you. So for last semester, when I gave 5 assignments to my students, written assignments here, they didn't really do really well. But I increased the rubrics, the component for content, the ability to apply the concepts here. And I gave the criteria for the component language proficiency, the ability to write well, clarity, and all that, only 5%. So hopefully that actually helps in that sense, the problem that we are all facing here.
Yeah, we can only reduce the issue.
Yeah, you can't eliminate it 100%. Okay, so is it 11 o'clock, right?
It's 10:03.
Yeah.
Prof, there's a question in the chat.
All right.
Okay, so Dr. Solah from Kuliah Pharmacy, some of the CLO is mapped to psychomotor element. The verb used in the CLO is perform. The teaching and learning activity is lab practical, and usually we assess this practical with lab report, but this is inadequate to assess whether the students are competent in performing the task. Can you share what you have done in creating rubrics for this kind of assessment?
All right. Reports are not adequate. Yes, if you actually rely 100% on reports, it could be something that not related to it doesn't reflect the true competency of the students. I do, apart from having the tangible reports that they submit to me, I also do presentations. And if I find that this student is actually quite suspicious, very high the scores, I would have a one-to-one session. So I had that before. Yeah? I had that before where I suspected the student, this is not the student's work. It's just too good. I did call this student. We had a Zoom session with the student and I asked the student to show me step by step. The student couldn't show me what was actually sent to me. And that was where I concluded that it wasn't the student's work. So I think it's quite difficult in that sense, but there are some ways to alleviate or to try to reduce this kind of problems in that sense.
Thanks, Prof.
All right, so let's continue with the second part of the session. Yeah. So this will be the second part of the session, crafting your rubrics in 5 easy steps. I believe all of you have your own rubrics based on the questions that you have asked. You have been using rubrics for many years. Yeah, that is not something alien to you. But for those who are actually new in this rubrics development, it would be really helpful. And also to help you, for those who have created your rubrics, maybe you can find some ideas how to improve your rubrics. Like I said, your rubrics is it's a progress. It's a work in progress. It doesn't end there. It is always something that you would add. And what I also recommend to you is to talk to your students and get feedback from them. Based on the feedback, you can improve your rubrics in the following semester. Let's look at the goal for this session. Yeah? It is to equip you with fundamental knowledge to design and develop your own analytic rubrics. I'm going to concentrate on analytic rubrics, yeah, because I believe if you master or you have competency in developing your own analytic rubrics, you can easily transform it into a holistic rubric. So this is the learning outcome for this second part, design and develop your own analytic rubrics. Step 1, you need to define the purpose of your learning task. What is it that you want from this assessment or this assignment that you have developed for your students? So we are designers of our assessment. Then you are going to choose a rubric type. After you have developed your own assignment, you're going to decide whether you're going to be using an analytic rubric or a holistic rubric. But like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to focus on an analytic rubric here. Step 3 would be define the criteria. Step 4, design the rating scale. And lastly, this is the hardest part, yeah? Step 5, which is to write performance descriptors. Especially if you have more than one instructors teaching the course, all of you have to agree what is it going to be defined in your performance descriptors. What are the 5 steps? First of all, define your purpose of learning tasks. 2, choose rubric type. 3, define criteria. 4, design rating scale. And 5, write performance descriptors. Here are some questions. There are some guiding questions that will help you define the purpose of your learning tasks. Will I use rubric to assign learners grades? Are you going to assess your students' work or not? Even if it's not graded, I would recommend that you have rubrics for your students. Yeah? So there are actually activities that we do in class that I don't grade, but it helps to improve the students' understanding of the concepts, certain concepts that I'm teaching. Will I use the rubric to provide informative feedback to learners? What are the learning outcomes of the task? Is it tied back to your learning outcome for the course? How will learners demonstrate that they have achieved the learning outcomes? Is it going to be through your cognitive, the student's ability, yeah, cognitive, psychomotor, or affective component? So this is create a rubric based on an assignment. Yeah? So this assignment is to assess the learner's cognitive and analytic skills in applying knowledge gained and constructed through the course diffusion of innovation. This is a master's course. By watching the Surrogates movie, which means that the students are required to watch this particular movie and write an analytical review of the movie in the context of innovation diffusion. This course is taught by my colleague, Dr. Masnida. What is it that you want? I want to provide learners with informative feedback on their cognitive and analytic skills, such as the following. This is what you want the students to have or to achieve here. To be able to apply the concepts of innovation of diffusion, they are able to make judgments. They are able to select and critique theories of innovation diffusion, and they are able to make the connections. This is what I want for my course. This is what I want for my students to achieve. Based on what the description of the task, then I need to choose a rubric type. If I am going to answer all yes to this question, analytic rubric, yeah, I want to provide detailed feedback for the learning task. I want to provide informative feedback. I want to provide formative feedback about the learner's performance. If all my answers are yes, then I need to come up with an analytic rubric. But if I am going to answer yes to this second part here, it will then tell me that holistic rubric is more appropriate. Do I want to assess the learner task as a whole? Do I want to make a general judgment? Do I want to assess the student's overall performance? Do I want to provide summative feedback? If yes, then a holistic rubric would be appropriate for your type of assessment. For that particular assignment, my answer is yes, which means that I'm going to come up with an analytic rubric. Just to recap, the analytic rubric would have this component, which is your criteria. How many criteria? You will decide. How many % of that assignment is going to be for your course? Your rating scales, again, are you going to have 3 rating scales or are you going to have 5 rating scales? Yeah, depending on how specific you are going to write your desired performance descriptors here. After you have decided that you're going to do an analytic rubric, you're going to create an analytic rubric, these are some questions that will guide you to define your criteria. What do I want the learners to learn from this learning task? In what ways will learners demonstrate what they have achieved in terms of knowledge, psychomotor, or affective domains? And what are the attributes of the final product? So what do you decide here will tie up in your decision. Yeah? It will influence your decision on the types of criteria that you're going to have and the number of criteria that you're going to decide. Good criteria have the following characteristics. Must be observable and measurable. So that is very objective. It is important and essential. Is it part or very important part of that skill or the competency that you are intending to measure? Distinct from other criteria, which means there's no overlapping of the criteria. It shouldn't overlap. It should be able to stand on its own. Phrase in precise, unambiguous language. Because remember, if you are going to share your rubrics with your students, we can't have really high-level kind of English, the types of, the way we write it cannot or shouldn't be so confusing to the students. Going back to the diffusion of theory course that I mentioned earlier, these are the 5 criteria that the instructor decided should be measured based on what was the purpose of the assignment. Communication of theory knowledge, communication of content knowledge, communication of ideas and argument. Yeah? How the students are able to communicate their ideas and arguments. Are they able to connect between CK is content knowledge, and TK, which is theory knowledge, and their writing and formatting? And when we do that, this is how the rubrics is going to look like. 4 rating scales, and these are the criteria. This is where you decide on the level of mastery with the corresponding scores, yeah, according to Royal. The scores are arranged either in an ascending or descending order. It can't be mixed up here, yeah? Shouldn't be logically. So it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, or 4, 3, 2, 1. Scales must be continuous, shows progression, and equal. You have 3 scales here, and they should be equal in your scores. But I actually have seen some lecturers decided that above expectations, they don't have equal scores. I wouldn't say it's wrong, yeah. It really depends on your style. Step 5, yeah, like I mentioned, this is the hardest.
Prof, can I ask?
Yeah, sure.
For the continuous, should it be like 2.5, 3.5, 3.3 in between?
You can have that. That is referring to the scores. But what I'm saying, the scales must be continuous, means that when you write your performance descriptors here, it should show there's progression.
Okay, thank you.
It should be progression, yeah. Okay, but your question is also valid. Sometimes you can 1.5. Instead of giving 1, you want to give 1.5. That goes back to your preference as well, how you design your rubrics. It's okay if you want to have 1.5. Step 5, write performance descriptors for the scale levels. like I mentioned earlier, observable, measurable, and specific. Parallel language to describe the performance here. The wordings for each scale is consistent. I'll show you an example what I mean by wordings for each scale is consistent. The performance descriptors vary in degree, yeah? Whether it's like amount, the degree, or intensity. How many times? 3 times, 4 times, 5 times? If the students are able to show that competency, yeah, in terms of the intensity, the more intense it is, you get more marks, for example. Here is an example of descriptive, which is not in a parallel language. So all this while I've been giving you examples of my course, so it's very education-centric, very in the context of education. Now let's give you an example which is general. Apple pie. All of us have eaten apple pie, right? And when we have this apple pie, the first thing that we think about is the crust. Look at this below expectation, meet expectation, and above expectation. Crust is soggy, heavy, or pasty. This is below expectation, yeah? Then when you have meets expectation, crust is somewhat too soft, thick, and hard. There's no consistency here, no parallel, in the sense that first you're talking about the crust here is soggy, heavy, and pasty. Then when you talk about the above expectation, crust is flaky and light with even consistency. So what's wrong here? The descriptions here should all describe about flakiness, about the same thing, yeah? But the mistake here is that the descriptors describe flakiness. One describes softness, yeah? Soft, thick, and hard. And then the other one talks about sogginess here, So this is what we mean by being consistent. To make or to improve this descriptor here, this is what is recommended. Top and bottom crust are not light and flaky. Top and bottom crust are somewhat light and flaky. Top and bottom crust are very light and flaky. So that shows there's this progression, this improvement. You may also add more descriptors here in order to show that this actually is a better level than or higher level than this level here. All right. So the whole idea here is just to show you that the descriptors here should be parallel in that sense. Indicate the degree to which the standards are met. So when you talk about the degree in terms of amount, frequency of intensity. So for example, my course that I'm teaching, education technology, I asked them to design an AR, augmented reality apps. If the students are able to show me that they are able to embed videos into it, they get more marks. But if all of them are able to show me that they're able to embed videos, I make it compulsory. Need to have, the criteria says that videos are embedded. How do I actually measure that? The more videos that they are able to embed into the apps, they'll get more marks. If they're able to create their own videos rather than taking it from YouTube, they will get more marks as well. All right. So this is the degree to which the standards are met. Yeah. In the sense that when you develop your performance descriptors, I would really actually say that this is one of the hardest part. You really have to think a lot, very deeply. But because we are the content experts, yeah, we know exactly when you say that this is the content descriptors or the performance descriptors that is expected of a student who is categorized as competent. And students who are not so competent. At the end of the day, it is us who decide, yeah? And I also know that the MQA, when they come and audit, yeah, they will have a look at our rubrics. And if so happen, the auditor who audits your course is someone who is teaching or who has expertise in your field, they may actually query. So which means that you must be able to defend your rubrics, why you are having this performance indicator or descriptors. But so far, I have not had any problems in terms of the auditors questioning. They just ask for clarification in that sense. Yeah. Any questions? Any more questions? When you talk about the degree of the intensity, frequency, and intensity. No, yeah? So This is an example of how the performance descriptors are defined. You will also notice that this gray box here, the instructor decided that for connections between CK and TK, she doesn't want to measure this part here. Students should have developing already. They are at this developing stage because this course requires students to have prior knowledge. So it's okay if you decide that there will be some empty boxes here. There's no hard and fast rules to say that all your cells needs to be full. No, we are the experts. We are going to decide all together with your colleagues. Now, if you look here, yeah, communication of content knowledge here names some examples, situations from the movie that is relevant to the concepts of diffusion of innovation. This is a concept that she was trying to measure, yeah, diffusion of innovation. Students are required to give examples, yeah, the situations which actually is relevant to the concept. Names and elaborates at least 2 examples, situation from the movie that are relevant to the concepts. Names and elaborate more than 3 examples. You see there's progression there. And when the student is considered to be excellent here, elicits several example situations from the movie that are relevant to the concepts and are able to connect to real life situations. Then this student would be considered as excellent, which means that you need to be able to tease out the performance descriptors here when you say that this person or this student is excellent in terms of communication of content knowledge. Communication of ideas and argument. Ideas and argument are limited to show understanding of the movie. Ideas and arguments show some clarity to the understanding of the movie. Comes up with some ideas with influenced by existing ideas to support ideas and arguments. And lastly, comes up with original ideas. Communication of ideas and argument indicates maturity, thoughtfulness, creative thinking, and effectiveness. I think the question about the students asking you, what do you mean by limited? What do you mean by some clarity? Maybe these kind of questions would be very, you get more questions at the undergraduate level as compared to the master's and PhD. Yeah? So if you feel that every semester these same questions are being posed by different cohorts of students, maybe you need to make it a little bit more detailed when you say limited. Define it clearly. So your performance descriptors will become longer, very much longer. And also, maybe you don't have this performance in descriptors which are longer. You may want to add, instead of having 4 here, you have until 7 or 8. I've seen, yeah. So in January, I did a training in Sunway University. There was one particular lecturer who was so detailed, yeah. He went into 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5 to that extent, depending on the lecturer style and your preference, I would say. So for me, like I mentioned, yeah, I would prefer to have a range rather than very fixed here, 1, because sometimes when we want to score the students, like you mentioned, you want to give 1.5 here. Where does it sit? Does it sit in adequate or does it sit in developing? That would, especially if you have more than 1 lecturer grading that assignment. If you alone, maybe okay lah, you decide that maybe this one, it goes to 1.5 here, right? So that is, like I mentioned, yeah, the rubrics is supposed to help the students and also help us, yeah, in particular in grading our students' work. Like I mentioned, grading doesn't mean that it has to have scores. It doesn't mean that it has to have grade. So if I don't want to grade the students here, I don't want to have any scores, I can just delete 1, 2, 3, 4. I just say, okay, for this communication and content knowledge, you are at the adequate level. Or for communication of theory and knowledge here, you're excellent, for example. Okay, so
Sorry, doctor, can I have I ask question?
all
Can
right,
go
so
to
we have reached towards the end already. We are at the Q&A session here, so we have about half an hour for this Q&A. Please proceed.
Can we go to the previous slide?
All right, the previous slide, this one.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Okay, for example, can we have can we have a different standard for different criteria? For example, let's say if we think communication of TK is have more weightage than CK. So let's say in TK we have adequate, like 2 developing is 4, competent is 6, excellent, for example, is 8. Means that is double from CK. Can we have different standard for different criteria?
You can have that, which means you're having a different rubrics. Yeah, you have a separate rubrics. You're saying that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can have that, but it would be quite difficult for you to actually grade the assignment. I would recommend that if you say that communication of theory is more, the weightage is more, then probably you have 40% for communication of theory and knowledge here. And then this one, communication of content knowledge, not as much weightage, then probably less. But if you want to have like, instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, because for content knowledge is as such, and for your communication here, you have maybe 2, 4, like that. You are actually separating, you're coming up with a separate rubric. Yeah? I wouldn't say it's wrong. It's just that when you want to mark, it would be more work for you, which if it's for you, then please go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Prof.
Prof, there's a question in the chat box.
Right.
In case we are doing group assessment, for example, group of 10 students given one task to do, how we distribute the marking? Is it fair to assess each student individually, or for fairness, all students should take the same mark? Because we ask them to do the task as a group.
Okay, going back to group work, yeah. So I think we all have this problem, group work. Is it fair to give them the same marks? Well, in my opinion, yes, because it's a group work. At the same time, I also have group assessment. You assess each other for the particular assessment, yeah? And this is where you find out that who actually is doing more work than the others, who menumpang, or what we call it, just jumping on the bandwagon and not doing anything. In all fairness, when it's a group work, all should be given the same marks. But when it comes to the assessment of the team contribution, I think that also takes into consideration. So I have had this feedback from the student. Yeah? So far, I think because of the problem that I was facing with students, yeah, I tried to reduce the number of students in a group. So last semester, I had only pair work. For masters and PhD, I never do group work. I try not to do group work because number one, we have lesser students. And also, number two, to lessen the problem of students who are not contributing. So masters and PhD, for me, so far I've never had any group work. For undergraduate, I had group work, 4 to 5, but I find that they are bound to have problems, yeah, where students are not doing their work. So this semester, I decided to have maximum of 2, pair work only, and based on the team contribution, yeah, they have been very, very open about it. They never told me throughout the semester. They kept quiet. They didn't want to tell me. Perhaps they don't want to, sour the relationship with their friends. But what they did was they wrote. I gave them a rating scale, and I gave them comments to write. And then I asked the students, how many % is your contribution, and how many % did this student actually, or your partner actually give, right? So when the student says, there was this particular group, yeah, who this pair work group, one was 80%, the other one was 20%, rated the partner 20%. Yeah? So I call up the one who got low contribution and ask. Yeah, of course, the student is saying, oh, I did all, I also contributed. So when I then have to go down to this situation where I open up the assignment and ask the students, which part did you contribute? Can you explain to me that part that you claim? So there are times when the students are not able to explain. I know that they are not telling the truth. Yeah, so group work is actually still a big problem, but having the rubrics will help in that sense. Yeah.
Prof, continuing from the group assessment, are you referring to the peer-to-peer evaluation?
Yes, peer-to-peer evaluation. Yeah. So which means that I have, at the end of the semester, I have one extra questionnaire for the students to respond. Who are your members, group members? Yeah, and rate. So let's say you have 4 students here. So I am the one who is going to rate my 4 members. So I have this option where I said, okay, rate what is the contribution of student A, B, C, D. So that gives me an idea of how well they have been working together. But because I find that to have 4 to 5 students in a group is also problematic. So this semester I decided that pair work. So lessen the students, but sometimes we can't avoid it when we have big groups of groups. I'm not sure about your university. So far my classes maximum is 70. I have 2 groups of students and we have demonstrators to help us. So marking is not really a big problem for us actually. But if there are times when we have a big group and we have to do the markings, then of course we have no choice but to have more group members in the assignment.
I see. So Prof, peer-to-peer evaluation, say for example, team member number 4 perform really bad, graded poorly by the rest of the team members. Do you do marks reduction?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I reduce the marks to be fair. And I have to call all the members to talk to me to make sure there's consistency. I don't want the student to be victimized also. So when I do this investigation, which is extra work for us, but as educators, we have to be fair to our students. I will call all the students and they would really tell me, and I find that what they have reported to me are very consistent, that only this particular student is having problems and so forth.
I see.
So I think what we can actually always do to our students is that give them the opportunity to voice out. But of course, like I mentioned, when we ask them, they will keep quiet. So give them the opportunity to rate their members.
Okay, we have a comment here from Dr. Tengku Haziamin. Peer assessment, there are times when students tend to give full marks to their peers in group.
All right, I don't think there's a problem. They are being very kind to each other, right? So if they give full marks to each other, that means that all of them will get the same marks. Fair enough.
Prof?
Yes.
Well, I have a question. I love the point when you mentioned that that there's no perfect rubrics. And then what if we design the rubric for the first time and we notice that our rubrics are too lenient where our students, they scored very easily? So how do you address that issue? Yeah, are we going to retain the marks or are we going to low down the expectations? Yeah.
Okay. Going back to your question, you are mentioning that this rubric is the first time you are using this rubric for the first time, and you find that when you grade the students, all of them scored A, for example. Is that what you mean?
Yes, Prof.
Okay. If you have time to revise your rubric, but on condition that you haven't shown that rubric to your students. But if you already shown to the rubrics to the students, my advice to you is stick to that rubric, because it's a fair deal. Yeah, you have shown the students this rubric and they have actually followed your rubric and they scored A for it. But the following semester, look again at your assignments. Do you need to actually redesign your assignment? Do you really need to refine your instrument or your rubrics? Yeah, I would recommend that the refinement is done after the semester.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Very clear.
Right. Welcome. Any more questions?
Yes, Prof. So in your sample of rubric, e-portfolio, which one is the assessment or assignment, the project or the e-portfolio? They have to do 2 assignments here, project and e-portfolio.
Correct. I actually had 2 assignments. The project was to come up with a board game. Yeah, board game means like snake and ladder, dumb, those kind. At the same time, I got them to write their reflection, which means that actually the board game, there was a rubric separate for it. But what I showed for today's session is the rubric for the reflection that I wanted them to write in that sense that for the entire semester, I want to capture the progression of their work. So for every assignment that you give to your students, they need to have one individual rubric, except that if you are you're using a generic rubric. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Actually, in the middle of your information sharing,
Yeah.
you have answered that, but there's a question about is the rubric given to the students?
Right. It's a rubric given to the students. Yeah, like I mentioned before, it's my preference that I give the rubric to the student at the start of the class. But at the same time, it depends on your preference. Some lecturers, yeah, they have this understanding is that there's this argument, yeah, that rubrics actually confine or restrict your students' creativity. There is some truth to it, because when you give the rubric, they won't do more than what is required. That is those who are not, they find that this rubric makes the students' mind so restricted. It's just, okay, I just need to do this much in order for me to get an A. There's truth to it, but I believe that this rubric actually brings more advantages than disadvantages to the students' life. So that's why I give it at the start of the rubric, start of the semester, so that the students understand. Because sometimes, when students, they get assignments here, they get very worried, they get very stressed out, especially during the lockdown. It's a very stressful situation, and they get this assignment, they have no idea what is expected, and no rubrics at all. They don't know what is actually being requested or what is expected for them to create or to come up with this assignment. So having this rubric, I believe, helps them reduce the stress, and they become more confident. They know what exactly they want to or they need to do in order for them to start. So that's why I always maintain for myself that I give the rubrics at the start of the semester. But like I mentioned, if you feel that you're more comfortable giving the rubrics at the time when you want to give the assignment. So some lecturers, they start their assignments here, and they give it at week 7. They give it together with the rubric. So it depends on your style. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. Okay, from the list of participants here, I can see Dr. Nasir raising his hand. Dr. Nasir, do you want to ask anything?
Yes, again, general question. Other than this theory of rubrics, which it seems that it does not relate to the academic background of the student or even the academic background of the lecturers, which actually make it very difficult to define general words like arguments are limited, clarity, and so on. Is there another theory of designing rubrics that include what they call, they relate to students' background and lecturers' background? Another totally different theory of assessment.
So far, I haven't come across that, but I don't see that, if you want to do it in such a way that the rubric is tied to the student's background or the lecturer's background, it can be done, but it would be quite difficult because every semester you have different students coming in from different backgrounds. That's one. So I would recommend having a rubric that is comprehensive, but it's enough for you to measure what you want to measure, actually, in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. In other words, the assessment system is very tight to, as Professor Ritzer say, where it's like the whole educational system, the idea of McDonaldization, the idea of factory, and so on. Yeah, it's it's tied to that system. We cannot escape that. Only that we can only reduce the problem only.
Yeah, correct. We can only reduce the problem. So sometimes I had a group of academics who were very worried that their assessment after they've graded, it didn't meet the bell curve, and they asked me, and they even mentioned to me that they were asked to change the marks because it was a skewed curve. The graph was not in a normal shape. Yeah. So I was actually quite surprised to hear that. To me, so far, in my university, we have never been asked to manipulate our scores to reflect a bell curve, a normal curve. If everybody is scoring A, it means that my students are competent. And I am confident with the way I'm assessing my students because I have this rubric, which is very objective. So anybody who wants to challenge my grading, you can have a look at all my rubrics is there. My rubrics is all there for all to see, and there's nothing to hide. So when I have students, so usually when I teach my course, there is a 2+1 course, 2 hours of lecture, 3 hours of practical sessions. 70% comes from my practical sessions. Yeah, I am not surprised when I have all the grades all graded already, waiting to take the exam. 70%, I can have students who score 67, 68, because they've done also well. And
Yes.
that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with the grading. They have just met the competency level that I have set for my course.
Yeah, Prof.
Yeah.
I seem to agree with your opinion about giving the A's, you know. We as a lecturer must be confident about our assessment to our student itself, because I do face the challenge of answering what you call comment from university about me giving so much A's to my student. My answer to the what do you call the question from my university is that I show them the way that we do assessment.
Yeah,
I do agree with it, with your. And another thing, Prof, what do you think about presentation as a what do you call it, as an instrument to assess the performance of let's say group work? What do you think about that?
okay.
Presentation.
Now I have presentation because my coursework has communication skills as the LO. So
Yeah.
it has to tie up with the LO, that's one. If it's not in the LO, but you still want your students to do presentation, because you know for our undergraduate, we want to nurture and develop their communication skills. We can have it also. And I have been assessing communication skills in my undergraduate course, but not for my master's course.
Okay.
Yeah, because master's course, I feel that they are more confident in communicating. And our class is smaller, and they are very engaged in my class. So I don't need to actually have special presentation slot to assess my student.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Yeah. So it goes back to how you actually, you know, how confident are you in making your decisions? Because at the end of the day, we are the designers of our assessment. We design our instruction.
And sorry for me to interrupt. I do agree also in comprehending the rubric itself. It must be stated as more flexible. You know, do you get what I mean? The wording in the rubric itself should be more flexible.
Flexible.
Not too strict. You know.
Too strict sometimes also would not be good for your students. Yeah.
Yes.
Sometimes you when you're marking and you didn't expect this. You didn't expect to see such way of how they would argue or how they would actually complete this assignment. So there's flexibility, yes, that's one. But of course, having a very detailed rubric would be helpful, so it reduces the questions that you are going to face from the students. That's another thing. But sometimes if you have too detailed, then it defeats the purpose also. Because if it's not there, then you can't give the marks to the students. We want to have flexibility as well. Thank you for your question. Any more questions?
Okay, we have Dr. Shahrir raising his hand.
Yeah,
Good
go ahead.
morning, Prof. Thank you very much for the informative sharing session. I would like to refer to the rating scale problem, which you mentioned that if 1.5, we don't know, is it educate or developing? And then the solution is to change to ranging of scores.
Yeah, right.
But let's say we change to the educate is 1 to 2, developing 3 to 4. And then still the problem of 2.5. Which one should be under which category?
Okay, you still have the same problem, right? So that which means
yes.
you need to make a clear demarcation here. So if you want to assess 1.5, the middle range here, if you are marking this assignment yourself, then you make that decision. If you are having more than 2 instructors marking the same assignment, then you all will need to have a general consensus.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have to discuss and
yeah.
okay. Thank you very much.
So don't be too rigid in the sense that just because we have 1 here, so for example, what you're seeing on the screen is adequate 1, I can only give 1. Yeah? I may want to give 1.5. I want to give 2.5. So it really depends on, but you must have consistency in the sense that, okay, maybe today you mark, nobody got 1.5. Tomorrow somebody got 1.5. So there must be consistency in how you do the marking. Standardization lah in that sense, yeah, so that it's fair to all your students.
Okay, thank you, Prof.
Prof, one question from the chat.
Yeah.
Regarding the peer evaluation earlier, can you share with us the format or example of this peer evaluation?
Okay, I don't have it in my in this computer actually, but the format would be, I have rating scales, which is Likert scale. I have some items, yeah. So 10 items, I asked them. And also, I give them the opportunity to write qualitatively what they actually think about it, yeah. So this peer rating scales is not comprehensive, but enough to give me an idea that this group has been working together or there's problems with this group and which member. So there's also components where comments about your partner. So if you have more than 1 team member, yeah, so there will be another component, which is part C, asking them to give their comments about member number 2, 3, 4, and then giving them the opportunity, how many % of the contribution from member number 2, 3, 4. That would actually give some indication to you, yeah, how well the group has been working. So usually I do that at the end of the semester. Yeah. I also warn my students, yeah, to tell them you are being assessed, and I take these comments from the peers very seriously. So one semester there was this group, this pair work, yeah. The partner did not contribute at all. But of course, the student submitted the assignment and included her name. So when the comments that I received from the rating scales, the member peer review, yeah, very long comments and all that. So I called up the student who was actually not considered to be not doing the work. And after a lot of probing, she did admit and she got 0 for that assignment. She failed the course and she's repeating. So that's how serious I am in peer evaluation. So that the news will spread. Yeah. So if you come to Prof. Wong's class, you're not working together, you're not contributing, you're going to fail this course. So it does give actually a very good warning to all my students.
Thank you, Prof. Any one last question, maybe perhaps?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi, Prof. I just need to know if, let's say, still regarding the peer evaluation, right? For our assignment, yes, we do have rubrics, just assessing how the student perform based on the questions. But regarding the peer evaluation, we don't have any at the moment because we have the assignment within that 2 hours, meaning the student need to complete the assignment within the 2 hours, and we will be there in the lab because our assignment is regarding writing program, for example.
All right.
So if that the case, right, do we still need the peer evaluation, or we can just observe as a lecturer how they perform? Is that considered fair?
Well, if the class is small enough for you to do observation, that would be fair, I would say, because it's class observation by the instructor. But because, especially when assignments that we cannot see, right? So that's why I highly recommend peer assessment. But if you mention that they do it in the class, you can see how much this communication is happening between this group work, then by all means, I agree that there is it's not necessary for you to have this extra questionnaire or for you to do this peer evaluation.
I see. Okay, thank you for.
Okay, great. Thank you, Professor Dr. Wong Sunyan.
Before that, can I just finish this last slide? Yeah, just to.
Okay, sure. Sorry, Prof.
This is a book, Alternative Assessment in Higher Education. I highly recommend all of you to read this book. So this book is available for free on this website. You can scan, and there's the website, JPT's website. Yeah, this book was written by a group of practitioners, assessment practitioners who are very passionate about assessment. We came up together with this book just before the pandemic, 2019, and we finished this book and got it published. This book shows what is happening on the ground. So we have lecturers from all over Malaysia. Yeah, I don't think we have anyone from your university. I don't think so. But it gives you an idea what is happening in our country in terms of assessment. You will be amazed to see what assessment methods that have been used by all our lecturers, and it comes from lecturers from various disciplines. So we have lecturers from the fishery department, we have lecturers from the music department, and so forth. So it's very interesting to see how they are actually assessing their students. And I have one chapter which is actually on rubric development in chapter 5. Yeah. So I would recommend you to have a look at this book and then read. This book is a very easy reading book, actually. Yeah, I see somebody raise the hand.
Yes, Dr. Adelina.
All right.
Yes. Hi, Prof. Wong. Sorry, I was from the YouTube. I came in through the Zoom because I really want to ask you this question.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, it's like this. Just now you were talking about peer assessment, right? And then you made it clear to the students that they have to indicate their evaluation of their friends in order for you to be just in giving them the marks that they deserve. Yes. So my question to you is, how then, I mean, okay, once you have gotten their feedback about their friends, how then would you decide, for example, like student A in this group, okay, who is not, let's say, contribution about 30%, how are you going to, I mean, how do you decide that you're going to sort of give this person only deserve this much marks, okay, and not, you know, how do we, does it require another rubric?
That's a very, very good question. It is actually difficult for me, you know, when the students actually, when let's say this student A assess their partner and say that this student actually didn't contribute. And the amount of contribution that this student gave was less than 80%. So what I usually do is I will look at the practical session. So I have my demonstrators, my demonstrators who are there. I will have of course, discussion with my demonstrators now, because the students are working on their work during the Amali in the lab at that point of time. Also, they do it outside of the classroom. So if I get feedback from my demonstrators, that they can see that the student is also doing something, or if the demonstrator say that this student is always playing handphone and all that, then that would be one way of assessing. So I would, if even in the classroom they are not contributing, so let's say the student say less than 80%, I won't be giving like deduct 80%. I would usually give a little bit more, but there is definitely deduction of marks in that sense. But like I mentioned just now, this group of students, this particular group who said that this partner did not contribute at all. I did an investigation. I spoke to other members, and these members told me, Prof. Wong, this student is really problematic from semester 1 and has been doing this for the past few semesters, and they didn't get caught by the lecturers. That was a red flag to me already, and I said this student deserves to fail. So she did fail in my course. So which means that you need to investigate and get the students to talk to you. Because when there's consistency, feedback from other students, it will help me decide that should this student really fail my course. So far only one student has had that, was in that particular category.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Wong.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Teddy, Prof. Teddy, for the ebook sharing in the chat. Is there any more question?
Prof, Hadi is here, Prof.
Yes, hi.
I just want to ask, just out of my thoughts, 2 semesters, semester 1 have the same rubric, semester 2 have the same rubric, no change. But because of the different groups, semester 1, they are very competitive with the presentation. Let's say I gave them 4, because it's too competitive, 4 out of 5, the rubric, for instance. But next semester, I found out that they are not very competitive, and I have a good example for that best one. I give 4.5, for instance, based on the proper rubric, which I've been given the first one. Can NP in that case, in that situation, because of the competitiveness?
Yes, I believe that your rubric is actually designed to suit that particular cohort of students. So
Okay.
if you have a group of students, particularly this group of students, I have this group of students, they are not so good in my subject because they are totally not from technology background.
Okay.
The way you want to change your rubric, if you have time to adapt your rubric, you can make it a little bit more loose in that sense, or in terms of your marking. So it actually, what I'm saying is that the way we grade our students here, it depends on the cohort of our students. I agree on that.
I mean, that's doable in that case. It does not mean that it's unethical. Why last semester you don't give a good marks, this semester the same way you give more marks? It's
I don't
not
agree. Yeah, there's a point what you have raised there. But what I'm saying is that the rubric has met the minimum standard of the learning outcome that I'm supposed to have.
Okay.
All right. So all the rubrics must meet that minimum standard. But because this particular group is so good, right? So there's competition there, right? So of course, there's another group of students that I am teaching for the following semester, not so good. But of course, you know, I still have to make sure that they meet the minimum. But then, in terms of the grading, it's not going to be the same. Definitely.
Agree.
Yeah.
Agree on that. So it means that yeah, of course, in that case, it does not mean that the less competitive group, they have good marks. They get good marks, for instance, 4.5 compared to the more competitive in semester 1, but they have less marks because they are too competitive. Then I don't seem that it's normal for them to have that type of presentation. So I gave them lesser than what the second semester should be.
Yeah, as long as it fits into your descriptors.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
right?
Okay, not that, Prof. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, the time is 10:58. Can I check? Prof. Mira, are you here? Do you want to give closing remarks? Prof. Mira is our director, CPD.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I just realized our network is not stable from on our side. So let me see whether is it clear? On behalf of CPD, Prof. Wong, we would like to thank you for a very insightful, and I know you have set aside your busy schedule for us, for CPD here in IUM. So we would like to thank you for the time, the insightful sessions, and then we've learned a lot, all learning, and we are all excited to implement the knowledge that you have shared with us. And on behalf of CPD, I would also like to express our gratitude that you have shared the resources, the extensive resources that you have presented today. We hope that this will not be our last session with you. We look forward to learn more from you because I know you have been
No, we've lost her.
A lot in KPT, so we very much looking forward for future sessions with you. And I would like to also thank the team from CPD. I would like to thank the team from CPD for their hard work organizing the sessions. I know it's not easy to organize the sessions, but you really work hard and make it have participants. So this is among the records that we have in IUM. Thank you again. I look forward for more sessions with all of you, and hopefully the knowledge that you have learned from these sessions will be beneficial for improving your teaching journey in the future.
Thank you, Prof. Mira. Thank you again, Professor Dr. Wong Sulian. Inshallah, we are looking forward to having you again in future. Right, how many do we have now? Because it's 11 a.m., 254. Okay, thank you everyone for your participation in this training. We hope to see you again next time. Before we dismiss, let's have a photo session. But before that, let's end with tasbih kafarah surat Al-As. Okay, Zoom audience, you can turn on your camera for the photo session now. Let me see. Sister Hilda will be taking the photo. How many screens do we have here? Okay, let's take the first one. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Second one. 1, 2, 3. The third screen. 1, 2, 3. The fourth screen. 1, 2, 3. Fifth screen. 1, 2, 3. 6. 1, 2, 3. 7. 1, 2, 3. 8. 1, 2, 3. Again, 1, 2, 3. Screen, the last screen. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Prof.
See you
Thanks
again
for-
in future.
Thank you so much for joining the session.
Thank you, Prof.
Welcome. And bye-bye.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Okay, we get rid of